The ground actually shook. I know people say that for dramatic effect, like in those stories old men tell around a fire to scare the children, but I'm telling you the truth. When 9 feet of muscle, hate, and bronze stomped its foot on the dry earth of the Valley of Isla, you felt the vibration travel up through your sandals and rattle your teeth. The sun was beating down on us, that relentless Middle Eastern heat that blurs your vision, but the air in the Israelite camp was freezing cold. It was the chill of absolute, paralyzing terror. Everyone looks at paintings of me holding a severed head and thinks I was born fearless. They think I walked onto that battlefield with a swagger, chest out, ready to make history. But let me tell you what I actually felt in that moment. I felt small. I felt ridiculous. I looked at that mountain of Goliath, of Gathand. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I was going to be sick right there in the dust. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a walking fortress. His coat of mail weighed more than my entire body. The spear shaft in his hand looked like a weaver's beam, thick as a tree trunk. And his voice, it sounded like thunder rolling inside a cave, deep and distorted by the helmet, mocking everything I loved, everything I was, and the God I served. But before we get to the stones and the sling, you have to understand why I was even there. I wasn't a soldier. I didn't have a rank. I didn't have a sword. A few hours earlier, I was miles away, sitting on a hillside, smelling like lanolin and wet wool, watching sheep eat grass. That was my life. I was the youngest, the runt of the litter. In my family, I was the afterthought. When the prophet Samuel came to our house looking for a king, my own father didn't even bother to call me from the field. That's how invisible I was. My journey to the front line wasn't a military deployment. It was a grocery run. My father, Jesse, handed me roasted grain, 10 loaves of bread, and some cheese for the captain, and told me to go check on my brothers. That's it. I was the delivery boy. I walked into the camp expecting to see the glory of war, the banners flying, the clash of iron. Instead, I found an entire army of grown men hiding in trenches, trembling like leaves. The atmosphere was suffocating. You could smell the fear. It's a distinct scent, like sour sweat and rust. For 40 days, this Philistine champion had walked out every morning and evening to defy us. 40 days. That's nearly 6 weeks of psychological torture. He would stand there, glinting in the sun, and scream, "Choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me." And for 40 days, not a single man from Israel moved. Not the generals, not the veterans, not even King Saul, who stood head and shoulders above everyone else. They were all frozen. I dropped the supplies with the baggage keeper and ran to the battle line just to see my brothers. I was excited. I was naive. And then I heard him. Goliath started his speech again. The insults were vile, tearing into the dignity of our heritage. But what struck me wasn't the volume. It was the audacity. He wasn't just insulting us. He was defying the armies of the living God. It triggered something in my chest, a heat that had nothing to do with the sun. It was indignation. I started asking around, what is going to be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away this reproach from Israel? I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was genuinely confused. Why was everyone just standing there? Why were we letting this uncircumcised Philistine talk about our God like that? That's when the first giant attacked me. Not Goliath. The first giant was rejection. My oldest brother Eliab heard me talking. He didn't hug me. He didn't say, "Good to see you, little brother." He turned on me with eyes full of rage. "Why have you come down?" he hissed. "And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness?" Those words cut deeper than any sword. Those few sheep, he was reminding me of my place. He was telling me I was insignificant, that I was just a curious, arrogant kid who abandoned his duty to watch a spectacle. He called me proud. He called me wicked. Imagine standing on the edge of a war zone, your heart pounding for your people, and your own flesh and blood tells you that you don't belong, that you're worthless. It makes you want to turn around and go home. It makes you doubt your own motives. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was just a shepherd playing pretend, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't about me or Eliab. This was about something bigger. I turned away from him and kept asking the same question until word got to King Saul. Meeting the king should have been the moment everything changed. But when I stood in front of Saul, I saw a man who had already lost the battle in his mind. He looked out to me, a ruddy-faced boy, no beard, hands calloused from the staff. Not the sword, and he sighed. "You are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him," Saul said, his voice heavy with defeat. "You are but a youth, and he has been a man of war from his youth." There it was again. The voice telling me I wasn't enough. Too young. Too small. Too inexperienced. The world loves to tell you what you aren't. They look at your resume, your bank account, your age, and they calculate your odds. And on paper, Saul was right. Mathematically, I was a dead man walking. But Saul didn't know about the secret history. He didn't know about the nights in the wilderness when the shadows moved. He didn't know about the lion that came for the lamb, or the bear that charged out of the brush. He didn't see me when there was no audience. I told the king, "Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them." I wasn't bragging. I was stating a spiritual fact. The same God who delivered me from the paw of the lion would deliver me from the hand of this giant. It wasn't confidence in my aim. It was confidence in my anchor. I had seen God show up in the dark, so why wouldn't he show up in the light? Saul finally relented, but then he did something that almost ruined everything. He tried to help me by turning me into him. He took his own armor, the royal bronze helmet, the heavy coat of mail, and put it on me. I stood there, encased in the king's metal. It was suffocating. The helmet slid over my eyes. The shoulder plates restricted my arms. The sword at my hip felt like an anchor dragging me down. I took a few steps and nearly tripped. I looked ridiculous, a boy playing dress-up in his father's clothes. The clanking of the metal was deafening. This was the critical moment. Most people die in battles. They were never meant to fight because they try to wear someone else's armor. They try to use methods that worked for others, adopting personalities that aren't theirs, trying to fit into a mold that suffocates their unique calling. Saul's armor was designed for Saul. It was magnificent, it was expensive, and it was useless to me. I couldn't walk. I couldn't breathe. And I certainly couldn't swing a sling with that much metal on my arms. I had to make a choice. Look like a soldier and die, or look like a fool and have a chance to live. I started unbuckling the straps. I saw the confusion in the soldier's eyes. What is he doing? He's stripping off his protection. But I wasn't stripping off protection. I was stripping off a lie. I took off the bronze. I took off the expectations. I took off the way it's always been done. I stood there in my simple shepherd's tunic, feeling the wind on my skin again. I felt light. I felt like me. I picked up my staff. It was old wood, worn smooth by years of gripping it while walking the hills of Bethlehem. It wasn't a weapon of war, but it was an extension of my arm. Then, I walked down to the brook that ran through the valley. The water was cold. I knelt down, ignoring the jeers from the ridges above. I wasn't looking for just any rock. I was looking for specific ones. Smooth stones. Aerodynamic. Dense. I plunged my hand into the water and selected 5 of them. Why 5? Was I doubting my aim? Was I planning to miss 4 times? No. I knew Goliath had brothers. I was ready to take down the whole family tree if I had to. I put the stones in my shepherd's bag. The walk from the brook to the giants seemed to take a lifetime. The valley was silent now. The shouting had stopped. It was just the sound of my sandals crunching on the gravel. As I got closer, the scale of me became terrifyingly real. He was a tower. The tip of his spear was sharp enough to pierce a shield like it was paper. I could see the sweat glistening on his forehead below the helmet. I could see the cruel sneer twisting his mouth. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Every instinct of my biology was screaming, "Run! Turn around and run, you idiot!" The fear was a physical weight, heavier than Saul's armor ever was. But I didn't stop. I forced my legs to keep moving, one step after another, closing the distance between the impossible and the inevitable. Goliath noticed me. He squinted, probably trying to figure out if this was a joke. When he realized I was the champion sent to fight Hema Boy with a stick, he threw his head back and laughed. It was a dark, guttural sound that echoed off the canyon walls. "Am I a dog? Did you come to me with sticks?" he roared. He cursed me by his gods, invoking Dagon and Baal to crush me. "Come to me," he shouted, raising that massive spear, "and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." This was the moment. The problematization wasn't just physical danger. It was a clash of 2 realities. In his reality, size and strength were the only things that mattered. In his reality, I was already dead meat. But I was operating in a different reality. I reached into my bag and my fingers closed around the cold, smooth surface of the first stone. The fear was still there, loud and screaming, but something else was rising up to meet it. A fire. A certainty. I looked up at him way up and I took a breath. I didn't have a sword. I didn't have a shield. I didn't have an army behind me that believed in me. All I had was a rock, a sling, and a promise. And as I locked eyes with death itself, I realized something that made the fears suddenly manageable. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. You come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin, I shouted, my voice carrying across the dry valley. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of Hosts. I needed him to know this wasn't a duel. It was a judgment. I told him exactly what was going to happen, that the whole world would know there is a God in Israel, and that he doesn't save with sword and spear. Then, I did the unthinkable. I didn't wait for him to charge. I ran toward the battle line. I sprinted right at the threat. While running, my muscle memory took over. My hand found the rhythm, stone in the leather pouch. Swing. 1 rotation. 2. The hum of the sling was the only sound in the universe. I didn't aim for the chest armor, covered that. I focused entirely on the one exposed spot. The forehead. I released the cord. The stone vanished from sight. A blur of gray speed. It wasn't just physics. It was destiny guided by faith. Crack. The sound of bone breaking was sickeningly loud. Goliath's eyes went wide, not with pain, but with absolute shock. His knees buckled. The mountain crumbled. He fell face first into the dirt with a crash that shook the ground one last time. Silence. Absolute silence. Then, the roar of Israel erupted behind me. I didn't kill the giant because I was strong. I killed him because I refused to stay on the sidelines paralyzed by fear. Your giant isn't 9 feet tall. It might be debt, depression, anxiety, or a dream that feels too big. But you have your own stones. You have your own history with God in the wilderness. Stop trying to wear someone else's armor. Be who you were created to be and run toward your roar. If this story ignited a fire in you to face your own battles, don't just leave. Join our community of giant slayers. Smash that subscribe button, hit the like so this message conquers the algorithm, and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story. And I want to know, tell me in the comments, what giant are you facing right now? Let's defeat them together.